Okay, I'm going to kick us off. Welcome to our third West Oakland Link meeting. This meeting is focused primarily on environmental justice and air pollution and the health impacts of air pollution to residents. For those of you just joining us, right, what is this? A quick overview of it is the West Oakland Link is a trail project, and what it will do is provide a protected bike and pedestrian path for residents and community members to travel safely. And by safely, I mean in a protected area away from cars and trucks. Where we are in terms of the meeting schedule, right? We've had two meetings so far, our most recent one being the design deep dive, and we are currently on our third meeting with several more to follow, our next meeting being on Tuesday. So we hope to see you guys again. Some meeting expectations before we get started is we ask that everyone communicates with respect and just be mindful of how much airtime, right, you are taking up. We do want to hear from everyone, and we do ask that you make space for others to talk if you notice that you're getting a lot of airtime. Respect for people's opinions, right? We're all coming from different places. Our values look different. So just being aware of that, actively listening. And, you know, part of listening is not simply waiting for your turn to talk. Assuming good faith, right? We wrestle with problems, not people. And checking for diversity gaps in terms of who's here, right? And who's missing and what we can do to ensure that we get more folks into a room next time. Any questions before I move on? Okay. I'm going to recap what we heard in last week's meeting with community members and residents. So we were able to meet with designers last week, and we went through different design options and the implications of those, right? And community members were able to map out what the path could look like. So you see that here. Let's see. Some takeaways from what we heard in last week's meeting is signage was extremely important to folks, along with strong lighting. We also heard that clear signage to separate entry points from exit points would be worthwhile, and just making this project itself stand out, something that's visually pleasing, right, and architecturally pleasing. A quiet ride was something that came up. Again, we heard about street lighting, planting, a wind sound screen, gathering spaces for folks, and an archway with a large welcoming on Mandela and West Grand. Our agenda for this evening, right, is a focus on environmental justice and what that means specifically in West Oakland. We're going to talk about traffic-related air pollution, health implications, and mitigation opportunities and limitations. This is a smaller meeting, right? So there will be a lot more discussion based around air quality and mitigation. I will be leaning on you guys to participate more. So just wanted to make folks aware of that. All questions are welcomed, even if they're not connected specifically to this agenda. So I'm going to start us off before I pass the mic, right? I'm just going to define what environmental justice is, right? And it embraces the principle that all people and communities have a right to equal protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. And this is from Dr. Robert Bullard, who's the father of environmental justice. And we know that environmental justice assumes, right, that everyone, regardless of color, race, national origin, or income, is entitled to the same environmental protections and access points, right? And that includes engagement and involvement that shape the communities in which we live. The challenge, right, is that environmental injustice, right, follows the same road that has shaped all other US policies, right, from education to healthcare to housing. It's been 34 years to the day that Loma Prieta struck the Bay Area, and I'm going to pass it over to Miss Margaret Gordon, the co-founder of West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project, to just walk us through the experience that communities like West Oakland, right, have had, and how when you're treated with disregard, right, from building multiple freeways to a high concentration of industrial warehouses, facilities, and waste storage, what that does to residents and what we can do to move us forward. Ms. Margaret, whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry, I had to reduce my noise pollution from the bar.
That's a good plug.
Yeah, I live right here at the BART station. So let me start with in 1994, 96, how environmental indicators project came together. We came together because we had got data that there was a significant impact of children and adults had asthma in West Oakland, and that there seems to be no solutions or remedy until we were invited by a water think tank company called Pacific Institute. They had got a small grant to educate West Oakland residents around how to identify impacts as indicators. Through those indicators, through that process with these students from the regional urban development out of UC Berkeley. These were the students, Berkeley students that work with us. And the Pacific Institute helped us identify these impacts. And at that time, while we were identifying things, it was like 250 things. And we narrowed down to 17 things. But each one of those 17 things, we had extensive impact of not only to what was happening to West Oakland, but also to people's health and the ability to live here in West Oakland. And the air pollution, trucks, the Port of Oakland, Red Star the East Company, and all those compatible businesses that were related to the port became the major factor. And also, why are these things in our neighborhood? And we had help to do extensive research on several things over the years. Zoning, planning, proximity, exposure, and enforcement. And these came down to the realities of why we had these things over the years in this one community, and not you go a mile away to Emeryville, mile away up to downtown Oakland, mile away, 2 miles away to Laurel Heights, or any of those neighborhoods. Why they didn't have the same industrial indicators that we had. So we learned going back to 1935, 37, when they developed the highway patrol and those things, the highway systems, where things was going to be planned for the future. That also included those industrial polluted businesses, came along with that plan going back to 1937, which now we have understood as part of redlining. So that means that if you lived in an area where the land was diminished in price or was unincorporated, or you didn't have the same levels of accommodations, you could that particular type of business to be put in that area. And that is like the start, beginning of what about environmental justice, and how, and also supported that we've been paying with our health over the years because of planning, proximity, land use, zoning, and enforcement, and proximity. We've been paying for our health. So when these type of plans come up, we have to do really fine tuning and deal with the most hyper-local items or issues to not have health to be considered in this project and these projects. So this project for the West Oakland link, knowingly that we have extensive truck traffic on West Grand, and the truck traffic is going to the Port of Oakland or going to San Francisco or going further up north. Is this plan has to be, how is this project going to protect people riding a bike, walking, pushing a stroller and a wheelchair? How is this project going to protect them? And what is all the considerations is going to be applied to this project for protecting people's health? And that is the environmental justice ruling. We have to keep in mind, what are those things? Are we going to have those trees, shrubberies? How high is the landscaping? How high is any structural devices is going to be in, to not to harm people's lungs? Because that's exactly what's going to happen. And also pedestrian safety. So this is all about the justice of our health. And we need to make sure that as we plan out this project, we always consider how people are going to be exposed. If you're in your car, you don't have the same level of exposure as you are walking, riding a bike, on a scooter, on a skateboard, and a wheelchair, pushing a kid on a stroller. It's not the same thing. And we have to be paying attention how this design is going to be including protecting people's health. That's about the justice, not to have the injustice to continue to harm people. This project should be about not harming people. And this is what we are here as WOEIP supporting to protect the people.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret. Are there any questions from participants for Ms. Margaret? This really is a treat to have her speaking for this meeting, and I do encourage you to ask questions. She is the pioneer in this field, and we are lucky that she is in West Oakland, right? And has been here and is staying here and is committed to the well-being, right, of everyone here. So this is an opportunity if you have questions. And if you prefer, drop it in the chat.
And also, we do have maps. We have surface pollution, hyperlocal, block by block, of where pollution has been at its highest, based on our working with a company called Acoma. We also have the data from Purple Air. We have the data from the Air District. We have actual data, and we need to continue to have this data as part of this program and this project to have how are we protecting the health of people in West Oakland and other communities when projects like this come about.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret. This partnership between WOEIP and MTC and BATA, it is the first of its kind. And to say the least, it is an experiment in terms of how agencies can work with community organizations and community members to make sure that the project that they're building is a mitigation in and of itself. And that at every step of the design process, that feedback is being asked for, it's being listened to, and it's being incorporated. And when it's not incorporated for whatever reason, that's explained to the community. And we really hope that this serves as a model for the region as we continue to move forward. Gavin, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was actually just going to kind of take this opportunity, Ms. Margaret. I wanted to ask if you could speak. I know there's been a number of kind of recent successes, and if you could speak to, one of these kind of successful programs that you guys have helped push forward, just to kind of give everyone an example of, of the work that you're doing. I think that'd be really helpful.
Okay, well, one of our successes that we rerouted the trucks from parking in the neighborhood. We got we worked directly with the city of Oakland Traffic Department to stop the trucks from parking in the neighborhood, and also rerouting them once they left the port, that they went on the neighborhood streets and had a direct route out of the port areas. We also worked on getting all the signage where parked about the trucks. We also worked to get the Oakland Maritime Support Services so that the truck drivers had a place to use the bathroom, get something to eat, handle all their paperwork that they need, have a convenience store in one place for them. We also worked when the decommission of the Army base, that there was more places to park trucks out of the neighborhood, a trucking facility to be parked outside of the neighborhood. So those have been our successes. We also worked intensely with the state on the idling rule. The trucks should be idling in the neighborhood. We also did a lot of work working directly with the truck drivers for them to understand how the idling affects their health as well as their own family's health by having that the fuel smells of diesel on their clothes. We have worked extensively to first to have filters on the trucks. Now we're working extensively to bring in electric trucks and electric charging stations for trucks into West Oakland. We also work for all the ships to be plugged in at the port. We just sued a terminal operator that want to bring the stuff that makes cement, that didn't want to cover it, didn't want to water it down. We won. We also stopped the port from using a 20-year-old EIR, and trying to justify them being able to bring this aggregate company called Eagle into West Oakland. So that's our latest. Those are some of our successes. And we also right now have the AB 617 emission reduction planning for all of West Oakland that meets the first Wednesday of every month.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions from the chat. The first one is from Serene, wondering where we collect data from and what that process looks like.
Which data? All our data is on our website.
I went ahead and dropped the link in the chat for folks.
All right.
And then the other question was, with the plan for the bike path on West Grand, will trucks still be allowed to drive on West Grand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think.
Okay. That's part of the design for people to stay tuned to and be involved in what is going to be the buffer area or a setback. So people and bikes are not mixing together. That's a very important ask. Is the design how it's going to separate trucks and bikes? Is there going to be a buffer area between the two? On West Grand.
And maybe I'll just jump in here and quickly, answer that question in terms of we are going to separate. The path will be fully separated in terms of there'll be large protection between any trucks and cars and people on bikes on the path. There is a few places where there will not be there's not room really for a buffer, just because, and that's particularly going over the railroad tracks, because we have to use the existing structure. Otherwise the cost goes way up, and it's going to take a number of extra years to work with the railroads on that. So there is a few locations where, at least in this first phase, there will be, there'll be buffers, and we can look at, things of protecting, and we want to hear more about those ideas in this presentation. So if it's kind of sound walls or pollution walls, so we do want to hear that feedback. There is some places where it's unavoidable, but for most of the path, it will be separated by at least 10-15 feet from the West Grand Road. And I wanted to just kind of jump into here and talk a little bit about another way that I think we're looking at the project and connecting West Oakland to the shoreline in San Francisco. One of the things that in terms of MTC and the Bay Area Toll Authority that we've been looking at with this project is we understand that there's a lot of amenities at the shoreline, including the John Judge Sutter Shoreline Park, which is going to be further developed. There's the eastbound path that's connecting all the way over to Huevo Bueno Island, and there'll be a really nice path in 2028 connecting down to Treasure Island. well, there'll be about 280 acres of parks. And the way the the Bay Trail is right now and the East Band Path, even though West Oakland is much closer to the East Band Path, it doesn't have a connection. And so it's the communities of Emeryville and Berkeley and kind of North Oakland, which generally are kind of better off communities that do have that connection now and are getting improvements. And so we don't want to see all of this big infrastructure and a future path all the way over to San Francisco move forward without involving and connecting West Oakland. And so that's a lot of what's behind this is also really trying to look at it and make sure that the neighborhood that's closest to these amenities in Oakland and in the East Bay also has a connection instead of just connecting the kind of communities up north a little bit more. So we've always kind of viewed this as that. In addition, it is connecting, creating a connection to the jobs in the port so people could ride their bike there or walk to the port. But we do really view this kind of from the environmental justice lens in terms of making sure there's equal opportunities to connect to these amenities and, and jobs and eventually San Francisco.
Thanks, Gavin, for sharing that, right? And we are expecting there to be multiple co-benefits of the building of the West Oakland link, right? Whether it's, more businesses being able to thrive here, more folks coming in and accessing parks, whatever that might be. We're hopeful, right? And we'll do the work to demand that the co-benefits are many. I'm going to move us into traffic-related air exposure and potential mitigation strategies. And this deck around TRAP was created by Ms. Margaret, Kelsey, and Maria from EDF. And they serve on our Health Equity Advisory Committee for the West Oakland Community Action Plan, which Ms. Margaret referenced. And that essentially is owning our air. And it is the first legislative piece that demands that air districts must work with disadvantaged communities to repair, right, the historical harm. And West Oakland was the first neighborhood to demand that. And we are approaching year 4 of the plan. So I just wanted to highlight that success and that win for this community. So traffic-related air exposure, what is it? So essentially what it is it's everything associated with being on the road, right? So whether it's from cars, trucks, and we normally think of air pollution, right? When we're talking about roads, we think about it in terms of exhaust, but it's not only exhaust, right? It's brake wear, it's tire wear, it's road dust, right? And it's spread, right, by the environment, whether that's wind, whether that's location, and it's also exacerbated by what blocks it, right, which is extremely, extremely important for this project. Okay. And in terms of road dust, we're starting to see research come out, and researchers are noticing that it's just a toxic mix of chemicals for road dust, right? Specifically microplastics, and that's a direct result of tire wear, right, from cars and trucks. So we have traffic-related air pollution, right, that we are dealing with and that we have to consider when we're looking at this project. Right? We are already surrounded by freeways, right? We have the Port of Oakland, and we're in a highly polluted impact zone. Health outcomes associated with traffic-related air pollution, right? It's what you would imagine, right? So lower birth rate, smaller babies, right? In terms of children, right? You have asthma, you have acute to lower respiratory infections, and in adults, right, you have a series of different health issues, right, ranging from asthma to respiratory mortality and diabetes. Short-term health impacts. When looking at traffic-related air pollution, right, if you have asthma, that's exacerbated, right? Worsening of lung disease, increased rates of hospitalization, heart attacks and strokes, and in many cases, or some cases, excuse me, death. Please feel free to ask any questions as I'm talking. Trap and exercise. So this is where the tension lies, right? For West Oakland Link and for the fact that we know we are parallel, right, to a freeway, right? So exercise, right, we know has many positive health impacts, right? What it does is you also run the risk of increasing your intake of air pollution, right? This is particularly harmful to people with health conditions, right, like heart, lung disease. Ultimately, right, the health impacts of exercising in a polluted area will look different, right, depending on the health status of the user, the AQI, right, and the intensity of exercise. I will also note that we're competing, right, we have been competing, right, with COVID, right, with wildfires, and for most healthy adults, exercise outweighs, right, staying inside and remaining inactive or stationary. West Oakland does not have many outdoor spaces, right, for exercise. And we do have high rates of obesity and other comorbidities to consider. And our intention is to ensure that all users or potential users have full access to the available information and data so that they can make a decision that's right for them, right, based on their health needs. So here we're looking at health data comparing West Oakland to Alameda County, right? And it's what one might expect, right? Higher rates of ER visits due to asthma, right? A higher rate of cancer deaths. And we see that our kids under 5 in West Oakland have, what is that? A nearly double the rate of asthma than kids in Alameda County, specifically if we're looking at ER visits, which must be extremely terrifying for them and their families. Health equity, right? That's what we're aiming for and what we're striving to do with this project. And that's defined as when everyone has opportunity to be as healthy as possible, right? So equal resources and opportunities, right, are essentially given to each person, right? But we know that's not the case. Equity recognizes that, right, each person has different circumstances, and in the context of health, right, each person is given the exact supplies, means, and opportunities needed to reach the same health outcome. Any questions before I move on? Okay. When we think about health equity, it is worthwhile to note that this project will naturally bring vegetative buffers and trees, which does have the potential, right, to in the long term, right, lead to what is known as green gentrification. And essentially what that concept means is that neighborhoods where neighborhoods and cities where there has been an extreme investment in vegetative buffers naturally sees the prices of homes, right, go up, and that does have the potential to increase, right, gentrification. And I wanted to make sure that I noted that, especially as we're talking about justice, right, environmental justice and equity, right, all of these systems work together. And I would be remiss if I did not highlight that as a potential outcome, right, in the future of this project. So here we're looking at air pollution's impact and how it looks different, right, across the Bay. Right, you can see that Oakland, right, has much more air pollution, right, than other cities. Right, I'm looking at Moraga, Lafayette, Orinda, and what's important to note is that it's not only the pollution, right, that's a concern, it's the proximity to pollution, right, how close you are to the source. Communities of color, right, face higher rates of health impacts from air pollution. Right, we're looking at West Oakland, right, compared to Oakland Hills, which is only 4 miles away, right, but we can see the clear disparity.
Nicole, it looks like we have a hand from Christopher.
Ah, great. Hi, Christopher.
Looks like you're muted, Christopher.
Hey, how you doing? It's hi neighbor.
Hi.
Often, I've talked to long-term residents here, and you're gonna laugh, but I've gotten this from multiple sources. I ask them, how come you don't have a tree in front of your house or more vegetation?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this common belief that it attracts rodents. So, and I haven't gotten that just from one, I got from several. I mean, I'm talking several generation families here. The reason they don't have trees in the front of the house, they think it attracts rodents and vegetation. So I wanted to kind of point that out to you that, that probably is one more reason why we have lack of more trees in the neighborhood.
Thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for that. Marjane, I see your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, there are actually studies that have looked at green space and correlated it with redlined maps. So neighborhoods that were redlined in 1930s today, they have less green space. So it's true that, there is this structure in place that neighborhoods were given less green space, less parks, more pollution. But it's also true that there is a lot of education that needs to be done for folks who have lived in spaces where there has not been a lot of greenery and are not used to it. They think, if there's a tree, somebody can lurk around it, or people can gather and hide behind a tree, or rodents can get around it or something. There has to be, transformation of the neighborhood coupled with education. And if folks are engaged, that process will happen a lot smoother. If folks are engaged in taking care of the trees, taking care of the green space, and enjoying it, that is potentially more effective.
Thank you for that. Alexis, go for it.
Yeah, just building off of Christopher's comments, another thing that I've heard a lot from neighbors is that they're worried about putting up trees because they're worried about the maintenance, about, it destroying sidewalks or electrical lines, or they're just like afraid that like somebody's going to trip and see them. And so again, I think like all of this really is more about education and making people aware that, the risks for this are low, and also in a lot of cases, like the city is responsible in certain cases. So just wanted to point that out as well.
Thank you for that. And another co-benefit of, or West Oakland Link is this project really has the potential to be a megaphone, right, to other agencies, specifically the city of Oakland, right, to do more and to do better, right? And it gives us just one more lever, right, to push them to do that, right? To something as simple as maintaining trees, right, so that we can have clean air, right, so that we can have shade protection, so that we can see nature, right? Miss Margaret, go for it.
You're muted, Miss M.
This would project potentially would bring the other agencies together to stop the Port of Oakland from increasing the pollution. We have no significant action plan to authorize or have authority to stopping them from increasing pollution. So as this opportunity come about to saving our lives through our health, the need is to stopping the Port of Oakland from increasing pollution. And only way that's going to happen is we all are on dealing with the port to have a real robust emission reduction plan for zero emissions, which they do not have right now. So one of the things that have to come out is how do we take the next step if we're trying to build health and they are increasing pollution by their business plan. We have to work more vigorously to stopping that.
Absolutely agree, right? This, again, right, will bring all different types of folks out, right? Not just West Oakland residents. And there is that people power there, right, to demand that the Port of Oakland be a better neighbor, to say the least. So pollution on the West Oakland Link route,
Sorry,
it's there.
Nicole, before we
Yes.
move on, there's one more question in the chat from Sarah wondering, will there be a budget built in for maintaining the future
Yeah, and I'll take that on, and I think also Ms. Margaret also brought this up in the last meeting, so I think this is really important and something people think about. I'm also an Oakland resident, so I do understand a lot of times even when nice stuff is built, it's not quite maintained to the standard that would keep it even accessible in some cases. So the West Oakland Link will be at least all the structured parts. So most of the West Oakland Link is going to be elevated structures carrying people over the port between the West Oakland neighborhood and to the existing eastbound path. This structure will be added to what is called the bridge inventory, which is the different parts that are maintained as part of the bridge. And it will be funded by the Bay Area Toll Authority, the maintenance in perpetuity. The maintenance will be carried out by Caltrans. Now, in terms of this is for the elevated sections and the parts that will be kind of part of Caltrans right of way. There is some parts of the project where we're looking at kind of more ground level and it's on kind of the Oakland street level. Those areas we're still trying to figure out exactly what the arrangement will be to maintain those, but that is definitely something that's on our radar and we're thinking about. But I think the bulk of kind of I would say it's about 90% or 95% of the project will be these kind of really large elevated paths that are going to carry people over. And those will be funded through the bridge inventory and maintained by Caltrans.
Thanks, Gavin. So pollution on West Oakland Link, it's there. And what we want to ensure happens, is that we are reducing emissions and we're reducing exposure, The fact that West Oakland Link is being built, ideally, we will see more people getting out of their cars, those who are able, and walking across the link, biking, running, taking their children for a leisurely stroll, whatever that might be. But the pollution mitigation is extremely important, to reduce the potential short and long-term health impacts, of exposure while using the link. So this is data from ACLIMA's public portal, for the Bay Area mobile monitoring data, And here we're looking at NO2, nitrogen dioxide. Okay. I'm just going to move us through different types of exposure, and there's a lot of it. Here we're looking at PM2.5, also from ACLIMA. Here we're looking at ozone, which is essentially a component of smog, And we know smog is harmful to your airways, Contributes to emphysema, bronchitis, asthma. And here we're looking at carbon dioxide. Questions about exposure, questions about these maps, or any questions in general?
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm driving, so I can't really look at the screen that well.
Yeah, don't look at the screen.
Sorry, I'm very new to this whole project, and so I'm just trying to absorb. My husband is kind of a regular cyclist around Oakland. We live in Oakland, though not in West Oakland. And, one thing I'm wondering, I'm noticing that I'm asking, my question, I guess, is, have there ever been any alternative locations that have been explored in creating a crossing? Just because it seems like West Grand and that particular area and the way in which the link is created right now seems to follow very closely to the vehicular traffic. And so I'm concerned about the level of exposure, that cyclists and pedestrians might have in kind of following the vehicular pathway. And I understand it's partially to do with infrastructure, and kind of budget and trying to find something feasible. But I'm just wondering if any other alternative locations have ever been explored in creating the in the crossing.
Yeah, so I haven't been with I've been with the project for about a little less than 2 years now, but this project has been a long time in the making. So it originally, I believe, was 2011 was when it first was kind of conceived of, and it was conceived of as part of the what is now the Judge John Sutter Shoreline Park. At the time, it was the Gateway Park, and as an access point to that park. And so when it was originally, the ideas, the main considerations were brought, the route that we're using right now was actually not one of the choices from my understanding. So when there was a bunch of alternatives tested, there were some that were more to the north and there were some more to the south. They all had a lot of problems. And my understanding is that this one route was actually suggested by the community. So this actually came out through the community. I think even though it came out through the community, I think that it makes a lot of sense from the infrastructure perspective, because of the route that it follows. Most of it is within either the city of Oakland or Caltrans right of way. So the land owned by the city of Oakland or Caltrans, which does make it a lot easier to build it. I also think that one of the important things, as for cyclists and stuff now, is that really it is seen as a future commuting route between Oakland and San Francisco. And, the main kind of route here is on Grand Avenue. The city of Oakland is installing protected bike lanes. I believe they're going to be all the way from Mandela and Grand Avenue through downtown, past the lake, and up to 580. So it is also this kind of part of this bigger cycling route. That you know, the future of this is really seeing people being able to commute from West Oakland and Greater Oakland to San Francisco, to jobs in San Francisco. So I do know that a number of other alternatives were explored. I don't have the details on exactly why this was chosen, but my understanding is this idea was brought up by the community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Siva. Be safe driving. Christopher, go for it.
Am I confused? I know about the whole bike project with West Grand. Is 7th Street an alternative?
Yeah, that's actually a great thing to bring up. Yes, you know, so we do view 7th Street as another alternative. It's not as direct from, you know, downtown Oakland or a lot of parts of West Oakland. But one of the kind of other keys here is we are going to connect down to the existing multi-use path that is on Maritime, and also help people going to that path avoid the you know, the future rail crossing. So we do see the 7th Street as an alternative route that people could use, and you know, part of what we're connecting here. So you know, I think
so if you're not a commuter in a rush from downtown Oakland to just get over the Bay Bridge and stuff, that's a nice alternative, and it's quieter on 7th.
Definitely, yes, yeah, that would definitely be a nice alternative. You know, and I do think that, you know, that we've made some updates in the last few months to the project where we've kind of added a Wood Street entrance, which is kind of another alternative to being directly on Grand for at least a section of it. It still takes you up to Grand. But yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to view the infrastructure connecting to the bridge and the future path to San Francisco as, you know, we want to have as many kind of routes and kind of, you know, we have a spine, but we want as many kind of routes going out from that spine as possible to really allow people to access it from all over. So we definitely view, we don't view the 7th Street as a, you know, a competitor to this path. We view it as kind of building upon each other.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Carlo, and I live in Henry Street off of 7th Street, and I wanted to ask about accessibility for folks on wheelchairs and folks that aren't necessarily able-bodied that be using the pathway alongside these bikers. Safety cautions for folks, and also security. What is there to mitigate like security? Is there call boxes that are going to be located on the path and such?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. You know, I think that in terms of maybe answering the security question, I think that's a lot of what we're trying to get. We have heard call boxes announced before, but we appreciate kind of, if you take the surveys, any ideas that you have or things you'd want to see. I mean, I think we'll try and explore it. You know, kind of cameras can be there. We'll always be trying to like orientate it in you know, places where there's kind of eyes on the street, kind of people seeing it. And so actually that kind of safety is really important, and it actually it's even more important now that we've added the Wood Street access point. So the Wood Street access point is really what we see as an access point that would be more, I think, friendly for people in wheelchairs or mobility devices, you know, because they won't have to cross frontage road, and we do understand frontage road is kind of a dangerous place, and you know, and it's kind of, it will be a little bit less stress. It's a little more winding than the entrance that will be right beside Grand Avenue. So I do think that you know, adding this Wood Street entrance does make us have to think about safety a little bit more, even though I think it does help with the accessibility. In terms of the kind of getting the details right on accessibility, which we think is really important, we as we get a little bit further in design, and as we start to really lay out some more of the details, we're gonna try and set up a meeting that is exclusively about accessibility and kind of accessible access to it. And so especially if that's something that is really near and dear to you, if you reach out to myself or Nicole, we can make sure that you're kind of aware of that, because we do want to kind of identify people in the community that will be able to speak to that, because it's a really important part. I think we want to know exactly where the entrances are and stuff, and have a little bit more details before we go in there, because a lot of it's about the treatments and how to make sure the kind of geometry works with everything. But I do think that the Wood Street entrance will be our more accessible entrance. The path going up is going to be a little bit wider, even though we don't expect as much kind of fast moving bike traffic and stuff like that on it. But we do want to make sure that we're addressing these. So I guess I would say, please look out for the future meeting that we will have on accessibility. And I hope that answers your question.
Nicole, I can't get my hand raised function to
Go
work.
for it, Violet. Oh, go for it.
My question is, have you, Miss Margaret talked about the air quality, and you have too. Have you considered the air quality coming from the commuter trains? And how is that being addressed?
Are you thinking Amtrak? Is
Yes.
that what you're talking about?
Correct.
We have not talked about it, and it is worth exploring and actually looking at that data.
Yeah, I would encourage to do so, because I have walked across the pedestrian bridge in Emeryville that links the Emeryville side over to where Pete's Coffee is, that little shopping area over there.
Yeah.
And when you're on that bridge and the billows of smoke come up, I mean, you can't help but to inhale it, because you're at a higher level elevation until the wind blows and it dissipates. Or if it's on a day where there's not much wind, it just lingers in the air. So please take a look at that.
We will. Thank you for highlighting that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have trains, we have trucks, we have cars. Let's see. So all of these contribute, right, to noise pollution. So thank you everyone for kind of setting the segue up. What is noise pollution? It's unwanted sound, right? And that unwanted sound, whatever it might be for you, right, it affects your health and it affects well-being. So my ask right now is, what are potential concerns that we should consider with West Oakland Link in regards to noise pollution? So the question is, should we be worried about noise pollution with West Oakland Link? And then the follow-up question will naturally be, what are ways, right, that we can mitigate that? But I'll start with noise pollution on West Oakland Link. So Violet kicked us off with trains, right? Commuter trains, freight trains. Any other noise pollution concerns that are worth addressing?
Looks like Christopher has his hand up.
Oh, Christopher, excuse me, go for it.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot of this can be mitigated with more trees.
Yes.
So it's like, I've noticed in the months where we have leaves on the trees, the sound is a lot less. So definitely promoting, high vegetation, probably like along 7th Street, 880. Frontage Road is a huge one. West Grand would be another one. So I think just the more vegetation and more green spaces we have, the less the noise pollution will be.
Thank you for
and
that.
Alexis echoes that in the chat. They say absolutely noise pollution is a big deal. If we want the trail to be frequented by anyone but commuters, people need to be able to have a conversation. Noise barriers are super important to a good experience.
Absolutely. And to Carlos' point around safety and security, right? If one of the mitigation efforts is actually a call box or some sort of alarm, right? If the noise is so loud that that alarm or that call box isn't accessible because no one can hear you, right? Then it defeats the purpose, right? And people want to be able to walk and hear themselves think, right? And have a conversation. Other potential mitigation options for noise reduction. So we have trees, we have noise barriers. Are there other things that come to mind?
Hi, this is Eva again. I'm just curious, a large part of the design seems to be these elevated walkways that are, is it like 8 to 15 feet wide? So do those, is that the kind of area that we have to work with to create these mitigations? Can we plant trees on those things? I'm not sure, or is it that there be planting around it, the properties? I'm not, anyway, if you could clarify.
Oh, happy to do that, right? Because this comes back to what mitigations are available, what mitigations are desirable, right, by the community, and what's actually feasible. So in terms of your question, yeah, most of the link is actually elevated, right? And a clear restriction with that elevated path is that we will not have trees directly planted on those elevated portions, right? Potential solution is we plant everywhere else that we are allowed, right? Whoever the right of way belongs to, whether it's the city of Oakland, the port of Oakland, Caltrans, whoever it belongs to, we demand that we're able to plant as a mitigation effort. Does that answer your questions in terms of limitations, or in terms of what we can do and where? Alexis, I see this common sense statement. Do not put the path on the same height as traffic when possible, right? And make the path farther away. The more distance you have from the noise source, the better.
And to echo, to elevate Brian's question as well, do we know the average ambient sound level on the roadside and bridge? Maybe Gavin can speak to that.
I don't. It probably was actually studied as part of the environmental documents. I don't know off the top of my head. I do know it's loud. Just from someone who actually goes and rides by there. I do try and take this route into my office in downtown San Francisco at least once a month, and I do go out there site visits to look at things, and it is loud. So I don't know what it is. I do know a number of us did a site visit one time, and I felt like I was after it. I couldn't. My voice was gone because I had been yelling so much, at these stop locations. So I think we do understand that it is very loud. I don't have the exact, I don't know the exact measurements.
But we can find that out and provide an update, right? Yep. Because that is one, that's information that we deserve, and two, it exists. And if it doesn't, we will demand that that data is collected.
Well, it also, I also wonder if we'd be able to do it so we'll look into it, because ideally we would do it in a way where we would identify the worst kind of locations in terms of the most noise. Maybe a little bit difficult because, like we said, the path is elevated, so it is hard to mimic that. So we'll look into see what kind of information we do have on that, and then we can see if we need to collect more or how we deal with that.
Thank you. Christopher, go for it.
I have my hand up also.
I see you, Miss Margaret. I'm getting to you.
All right.
Let Miss Margaret go first.
You so sweet, Christopher. Miss Margaret,
Thank you,
defer to you.
Christopher. We have never had this conversation. What kind of policing patrolling, that will be part of the project? Will there be a regular, some type of officer patrolling the pathway during the day hours and the evening hours? And that needs to be very concrete.
Do you think that's something that needs to happen, Miss Margaret?
Yes, they do. We need to know if there will be some kind of patrol. So put those who are bad characters on notice that there will be somebody or some bodies patrolling the area. It's not just to have, a call box, but they need to know and surveillance cameras, but they need to have a body walking or driving, riding a bike, something as part of the safety issue for this project.
Thank you for that. And we did see in our survey data, right, that safety was the primary concern for users. And we know that safety, again, looks like different things for different people. But at the end of the day, right, when you leave your home, the expectation is that you get to return safely back to it.
So for the freeway, you have the highway patrol. For the streets of Oakland, you have the police department. For this part, we need to know if there's going to be officers on bikes, officers walking, or they on some kind of safe way or something that people could feel that safety was part of the plan.
Yeah, and I would say this is really helpful. I think that this is why we're doing these meetings, and this is why we're trying to bring this out, because I don't think that is something we've discussed, but it's something we need to. So I do know that there is on the existing eastbound path, not all the time, but there is a bicycle police officer, I think is a CHP officer that goes out there throughout the day. So there is kind of a precedent for that, but this is something we definitely need to think about and get back to everyone as part of the safety discussion, because it is not something that has been on our radar. So thank you, Ms. Margaret, for bringing it up.
Absolutely. Christopher?
Oh, I echo that. Hallelujah, Margaret. I think I'd fall off my chair if I saw an OPD police officer on a bike riding through the neighborhood or the paths here. Oh, that would be something. And I'd just probably smile if I ever saw that. So, an OPD officer riding by my house with on a bike or heading towards those bike paths. One of the things you brought up before, Nicole, is you were talking about noise pollution and stuff, and we were talking about all the cars, the trucks. But one of the things that I've noticed is the donuts. All the car shows, people who get off the freeway and race 60 miles through our neighborhood, blowing all the stop signs. I'm hoping this can be addressed to the city to even put more pressure on them to do traffic calming measures.
And that's where you come in, right? That's where everyone on this call, right, comes in, and all of your friends, all of their friends, all of my friends come in, right, to actually demand these things, because this is $100 million project, right? And we need our city, right, to do its part. And what good is a protected bike and pedestrian path if everything around us is still in chaos, right? Chaos that's actually allowed and due to lack of enforcement, right? So we need to put that pressure on the city, right? To like Miss Margaret said, these bad characters, right? To let them know that we're here, and we're done. So I think this again is an opportunity to use that megaphone for that. Or maybe we could watch, the donuts and the sideshows from the West Oakland link, and then that becomes an experience in and of itself.
Nicole, Kevin
Yes.
has a really interesting question. He's wondering, is there a way to mandate that noise levels stay under a certain level in the design? For example, OSHA recommends that noise above 70 decibels over a prolonged period of time may start to damage hearing. So perhaps along with with bike and people counter or pollution monitor, we could have a noise decibel counter. And then we have a couple other questions like that. Or ideas. Can we ask the engineers if there are sound absorbing materials that could be used in a construction?
Definitely yes to asking the engineers about the sound absorbing materials in terms of mandating
I'll take
noise
that.
level.
I think that the thing that we or at least myself as the project manager here has to pay attention to is kind of what you're able to achieve. I mean, if we set that and that was a goal that we set, we might not be able to do anything else in terms of planting or all our investment might have to go into meeting that criteria because it is beside a very large highway. So it is always there's a lot of choices for kind of what we're able to deliver with this project within the budget. So I would say that mandating a certain level probably wouldn't make sense, but I do think the other suggestions, we should be definitely looking at this and how to integrate these things into it.
And Kevin, I definitely will do what I can on my end to see, what is the cost of actually mandating something like this, right? Because Gavin's a project manager for MTC BATA, and I'm the project manager for WOEIP, and we want to see this project built, and he has to look at that budget, right? I don't, right? So I will do my part to take what you're saying as far as it can go, right? And actually get a number, right? Is it feasible? Can we actually have a maximum noise level and have 500 trees? In my mind, yes. And I think that's what we should demand until we hear otherwise. And I do want to note that the European standards around pedestrian paths are ideal, right? And we have not seen anything like that in the US.
No.
And it's unfortunate.
I would also say that this would require regulating vehicles, right? Because you're allowed to have the loudest vehicle you want in the US. So actually getting to those decimals, we would also have to regulate which vehicles could drive on our streets, which would be a little more complicated.
Which comes back, I think, in some ways to Christopher's point, right, around just enforcement, which we know for those of us who live in West Oakland, right, that it is a common noise pollution concern. Okay, we have 12 minutes on the clock, so I'm going to make them count. What are mitigation opportunities for the link, right? So we were talking about noise pollution, but what are other potential strategies to make the link as pleasant and as healthy as possible?
I already said the safety issues, making sure we have the patrol system set up.
Yeah, thank you for that. And for me, right, hearing you say that, Ms. Margaret, that is mitigation, right? If no one feels safe on the path, right, they're not going to use it, right? So we need to address that on the onset. What else do we got?
I would like to add,
lots of signage.
Okay, I heard signage. Violet, what do you got?
I would like to add that the road surface or the surface that we'll be traveling on be made of a material that will not absorb the heat but deflect it. So then that on those very hot days, we won't feel that heat island effect.
So smart. Thank you for that. Right, especially, right, I'm just thinking about people walking their dogs and, that, and then the hotter it is, right, the less likely, right, we are to use it if, right, we're feeling that heat island effect. So thank you for that. What else for mitigation?
And wherever they can have covers, shelter like covers, like at the bus stops, wherever there is that can be built into the design, we need to have that also.
Okay, so,
To slow down the reflection of the sun and the heat. We
so
need to have that part of the design.
okay, so like a climate control measure, that's helpful.
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Margaret. Okay, shade structures I'm hearing. Right, making sure that the material used doesn't create a heat island effect. Safety. What are other things for mitigation opportunities here?
Alexis suggests potentially using materials that are hard to, or that are easy to clean, since pollution sticks to surfaces, and the easier the path is to clean, the more likely it will be. And I think there's also some notes in the environmental analysis. Gavin, maybe you can speak to this a bit around sort of pollution prevention, or graffiti prevention. And I think some of those materials usage relates to that as well, perhaps.
That will happen. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a concern that we thought about, and it is, you know, this is going to be a structure owned by Caltrans, so it's definitely something that they deal with and they make sure is in their, you know, in this kind of structure.
But Caltrans not here to talk to us.
They'll talk to us, Miss Margaret.
Well,
Yeah, but right this minute, Caltrans is not here to tell us what they're gonna do.
Well, so we're the Bay Area Toll Authority and MTC we're the ones that are designing it and building it, and they're going to take on the maintenance and ownership. So we're trying to get it right, and then we will, you know, so that's why we're taking on all this feedback. But there is, I guess I would say there's certain requirements that need to be met to make sure that they're comfortable maintaining it. So that there's always this kind of balance between having something that they'll let us hand to them and maintain in perpetuity, or because we're not an organization that has staff that goes out there and maintains stuff. We just can pay for it. So that's always a kind of a balance that we have to strike.
I see waste containers that are emptied frequently. Thank you for that. Lighting that works and is maintained. Yes. Seating along the path for rest stops and intermittent and entry exit points as appropriate. One more time. We will make sure that Caltrans is at a follow-up meeting, right, so that we can ask these types of questions, right, directly to them, right? What are their plans to ensuring that West Oakland Link stays usable, right, stays clean, and stays safe. Other mitigation efforts that come to mind? Okay, here are some potential mitigation
So
strategies.
what is the mitigation for the railroad spur in the back as you go on across to Treasure Island? Because there is a railroad spur back there now to be potentially used for the Port of Oakland, for the City of Oakland Port.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let me speak to that. So that's actually one of the reasons why the path stays elevated for the whole time, and one of the reasons it's elevated is so that the path is going to go over that those railroad tracks at, I forget the exact number, I think it's 23 feet high, and so it you know, we are designing it, this path, in order to make sure that if that railroad becomes active, that you know, people don't have to cross it. And one of the major concerns with this is the location of that railroad track. If it ever does become active, is in a place where they'll do train shuffling. So they'll have to kind of connect the trains. They put together the trains to create these mile-long trains, and that means that the trains could sit and block that the existing path there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes in some points. And that's just not acceptable to have someone who's trying to reach the shoreline or trying to reach a job in San Francisco have to wait that long. And so this is another reason for the path is to be able to carry people over that railroad track.
Okay, but also, Garvin, you need to understand that the plan is to double stack those railroad cars back there. So what is the mitigation for that?
Well, so we've looked at the plans in double stack, and that's why the height is so high. And so we'll go over it. But in terms of, so that's kind of the mitigation for people not having to deal with that. It does create a lot of kind of engineering challenges, and it does mean that when the path comes down, it kind of has a hairpin turn that we would rather not have. But it's the only way, because of how high those train cars will be, to make it possible to let people just completely avoid those rail tracks altogether.
And so what is the landscape between where the railroad tracks are and where we intended what people would be using, biking, walking, using their scooters? What is the landscape in between that? Is there going to be any landscaping, any trees, shrubbery?
So maybe
Gavin, this will be the last question.
Okay.
Since we're at the 3-minute mark.
Yeah. So let me break into two parts. The part south of the rail tracks, that is the OMSS, the Operation Maintenance and Services Center, the truck stop. That is all their property, which is right south of the railway, and so that is going to be, this truck stop, a mitigation effort for West Oakland. And so we're working closely with them. I don't think it's whatever they want to do on that property in terms of landscaping. We could always work with them, but that location right there, there's a lot of kind of trucks moving in that area and fueling. And so when it does come down on the other side, I do think there is some opportunities when it connects to the Bay Trail and the East Span Path connector there. The problem is that's a little bit farther out. Right where it comes down, there's some really important East Bay mud utility, huge. I mean, their biggest kind of outflow line flows right under there. So there's a bunch of utilities there that we have to watch out for. But we have heard comments that people would like to see some sort of a urban forest once you come down from the path. And so that is something we can look at, and we just have to figure out, make sure we're not going on top of utilities and where those locations are.
Great. Thanks for answering that, Gavin. And Ms. Margaret, thanks for highlighting that. So possible mitigation strategies, right? A lot of them have already been mentioned here, and these are simply recommendations, right? It is up to the community to decide, right, what is important, right, what values we collectively hold and what it is we are demanding, right? So we have, right, a solid barrier, dense vegetation, developing pedestrian and cyclist routes, right, that are away from high traffic roads, right? And I think a key one that's important to highlight is actually having stationary air monitoring, right? So that users can see what the AQI is before they start engaging with the path. And that seems, definitely seems feasible and smart and responsible to do. And I imagine that will allow people to make the best decisions possible. I don't want to keep anyone longer because, I know that this is cutting into your evening and into spending time with your family, but feel free to stay if you want to continue. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. And for those of you who need to go, we really appreciate your time and your participation, and hope to see you next Tuesday because we're doing this again.
And we're going to drop a link to the survey for tonight's meeting in the chat. So if folks can fill that out, we'll also send it out tomorrow by email to folks along with the recording.
And I would
Thanks,
say,
Jess, for that.
And I would just say to everyone, even though things were brought up in this meeting, if you want to emphasize them, it does help. The more people kind of say an idea, it does help imprint that. So if there was things that someone else brought up a suggestion, it doesn't hurt to say that again, right? If the sound barriers or anything like that, I think that's
Absolutely.
always.
Yeah, and to Gavin's point, right, we know that power yields nothing without a demand, right? That's Frederick Douglass. And it's important, right, that these concerns, right, that we are echoing them when we have them, right, and challenging others when they're not being heard or expressed, right? So please keep it coming. And I'm going to stay on for as long as needed. If I see you that you're still here, I'm assuming you want to talk to me. So, and for those of you who got to go, enjoy your evening. And thank you again.